Hi, this is Mahipal Lunia with the Immersion Foundation again, and we are here today with Duke Paul Porter, continuing our conversations around SCA and his unique development through the years and the system that is now called the Bellatrix system. So what we're going to cover today is an overview of what the Bellatrix system is, the five categories of techniques that Duke Porter has developed, and the end games. What he's also going to do is demonstrate for us what each of these pieces are, and in future podcasts we'll get a lot deeper into each category of these techniques. So with that, Paul, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. So, Paul, this is your show. Do you want to start off with, your development of the Bellatrix system and how you would define it and what it is, and then we'll jump into the techniques themselves.
Okay. Well, the system, it's an integrated system, so everything works together, and it tries to make use of the optimum biomechanic movements and takes advantage of any elements of physics that I can put into it, which are a lot. Don't want to get into that too much today, though. I thought I'd go over, just demonstrate my major techniques, say something about each of them, and then we'll go from there.
Sounds like a plan. You have the floor, Paul.
Okay, so before I came in and started doing the core-driven power generation, if you wanted to swing at somebody, basically you just the arm, and you can do pretty powerful throws with that. And I changed it so I'm turning my body and letting it drop towards that knee, and I'm letting it whip the blade around my body. So it's a whole lot faster, it's a whole lot harder. And then one of my other techniques is they call it a wrap. You want to hit somebody on their back, you can't get around their shield. We play with shields. So what I do is I swing that same thing like this with my body, only I aim for a point that's about here. So when my sword gets there, I will hit right on the sweet spot of the sword. The hand has to stop, and what that does is it changes the radius of the swing. The radius is from the center of my body to the balance point of the sword, so it's about like this. When it hits that hand, the center of rotation moves to the hand, and then it's only about that long. And the physics of that makes the blade speed up, and that adds a lot of power. So here, like, I'll step in. Okay, so then we have, those are the two direct attacks where I'm coming in and throwing that blow. They have very, I can hit any target on there. I can make the wrap go up or down or in. So there are variations, and a lot more than that, actually. Then the next category actually contains two major techniques. You've got the sword out there, and you've got to get it back here and out there to hit again. And the way they did that usually before was they hit, they come back, cock again, back again, like that. So I developed two techniques. One goes from my forehand blow to another forehand blow, and then the second one is to an offside blow. First one's called a teardrop. The blade moves back in a teardrop and goes back forward. I get the power by yanking the sword back, almost like I'm headbutting somebody behind me. And that supplies the power. And then I have my arm, instead of pulling it back into me like this, I throw it out like that to gain this big wide radius. Of course, you get shortened down the better you get at it, and you can apply power. And when the sword gets about here on its way back, my body starts to rotate the other way. So I get that real whip for the sword. So it's like this. And then the other one, I call it single hip for a reason that doesn't make any sense anymore. If you're like this, I do that same headbutt back, except I pull it around my head like that. One of the real tricks about this is a lot of people come get here and then they stop the blow and swing it like that, which loses all the power you got in the backswing. And then your arm, which is not as strong as your core, is putting power in. One of the other interesting things is I've talked about reducing the radius to get power, so I reduced the radius, but now I'm increasing the radius. And the way you make that work is right when your blade goes over your head, you start pulling your hand sideways. Because the radius, this curve here has a center, and you pull it towards the center, and it maintains the flow of the sword around, maintain the power you got in the backswing. Okay, now the fifth of the major techniques, actually, I had it a minor technique until I started writing the book, and because it comes off of one of the other techniques. You have to, it's a variation of the snap or the single hip, stuff like that. But it's so powerful and so useful, I just made it a major technique. So you come in on the snap and you miss, or you skip it off the shield. Skipping off or just missing causes my opponent to try to block, and nothing happens. And then the blade comes down here and comes out like that. So it's, of course, I can come up anywhere else. And then I can do weird things like stuff like that. And each of these techniques has a lot of variations. Do we don't want to get into them right now, or should we do that later? I'll show a couple.
Maybe show a couple, and then as we approach each of those techniques in depth, we can do that then.
Okay, first I want to mention a movement technique and a tactic. The movement technique allows me to start my swing from out of range and move into range without losing any power and without giving my opponent a warning. So when I'm doing this, when I'm lining up, I'm about here away from being able to hit my opponent. The tactic is I may or may not go into range to hit him, but I use something called a slide step. It's very similar to a fencer's lunge. So this core-driven power allows me to, all the power is already in the sword right there. So I don't really add much past that. And so if I unweight my front foot right here, it just slides in like that. And I can vary that from like 6 inches to 2.5 feet. The tactical thing is, I'll come in here I'll slide into this range here where just enough to make them react to it. And then I'll go into something else. So in this case, one of the variations of the snap, I'll come into this range here, but I'll miss. And the sword will go like this and we'll spin around like that. So it changes the timing. So just, and I showed you one for the offside teardrop that I can come back through and get up there. Probably the fastest thing I ever came up with. I figured it out one time I was in practice, and I realized I could come around here like this, but I didn't know how close I could get to the pedal. This is called the pedal striking post. I got about this close and I could get it through, and then I came up and hit. And it was so fast it bounced back and hit me in the head. is just an amazingly fast thing, because you pull it back into the return, you're adding power. Then you pull it in and that increases the power. Then you go around another corner and that increases the power. Then you go around another one and increases the power and the speed. So from here, very quick. That's one of the major things of that. The one of the more interesting ones from the teardrop return is I can hit multiple blows really, really quickly. What I do is after I hit, I just flip it back to my arm at the same time I rotate my body that way. And I do that once, twice, 3 times. So just and then there's some really interesting variations of the wraps. So usually you come down here like this, the blade turns over where we want to hit. But there are other ways you can do it. So instead of that, I'll come here, instead of turning the blade over, I'll keep swinging forehand, come around like that. So just, and that's some variations for you and the major techniques and the movement techniques. The tactical technique is that when I move into the point where I'm making them react to it as opposed to hitting, I call that the parallel circles. So if I'm standing on a nearer circle with my front foot, then I can hit my opponent. If I come into an outer circle that's about a foot out from that, I can come into the point where I'll miss him, but by enough to make them react. And that's where we get into the making my opponent do what they want, what I want them to.
Yeah, so I think that's the heart of things, the way I was looking at it, right? And I think this idea of an outer circle and inner circle, I can visualize that and make sense. So when I'm doing something from the outer circle, it presents a legitimate threat that he better respond, otherwise you're going to slide in.
Yeah, the thing is, if I'm sliding in, look at the difference I can make on a slide. So I'm way out here like this. Okay. I can slide in to 6 inches and I'll miss it by a lot, probably won't get any response. But I can use that same technique to move all the way where I can hit. So you can vary that like 2 feet.
Yeah.
The other movement technique, which is sort of handy in this, is how I move around footwork. It's really pretty simple, and it's right from judo. Every time you move so your foot is actually pushing out. So you step here, if you don't do something, you'll push it back this way. You just keep going from that foot to that foot to that foot to that foot like this. Always maintaining your body in between your feet. So my ankles are outside, my knees are outside my hips. And that keeps that rotating cylinder I use to power blows. I can lean over, but I have to leave that triangle by itself. So I can actually throw full power blows from here. But if I do this, no.
So I have a kind of a question. So how many bouts do you think you've been in within the SCA?
Oh, geez, I don't know. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
Well, there was one time really early on. God, it was way back in the early 70s, mid 70s. And I'd already gotten to the top of the heap as far as fighting goes. There's this big inter-kingdom event called the Penzic Wars. It's held in Pennsylvania every year, and everybody comes to that. The first time I came back to that thing, everybody wanted to fight me, of course, so I just had them line up. And I fought like 2 hours without even taking off my helmet.
Wow.
And most most of those bad bouts were like 10 to 15 seconds, 1 or 2 blows.
Wow.
So probably a couple hundred right there.
Wow. So, I mean, the sense that I get is these are fights that are done in anywhere from 10 to 20 seconds, most of them. And I can just imagine the sheer power that you need to generate to drop these guys on their knees, so to speak. You got to drop them.
Yeah, we don't. You have to hit full power. Basically, you have to get a nice shocking hit. And it's not like Taekwondo with their padded vest. It's something you're really hitting something. We have a it's not really a regulation, but a strong group feeling about don't use excessive force. So if somebody swings and misses you and they're like this, you don't just cream them on the back of their neck. You lighten up. And they're honor bound to take that. You can talk to them and say, I let you go on that one. You're going to take it? They say, well, it wasn't any good. So next time they do it, you won't be nice.
Got it.
And most of the fights actually last a little longer. There's a lot of moving in and out of range and attacks that don't really work, and it's 2, 3 blows, 3 or 4 blows. One of the things that really hurts on the really good attacks is that people get out of position where they can't continue the attack. They can get in range after whatever they do it, and they can still keep going like this. But if you try to get the length of the combination with the good power generation, I can come like this, and I can move all around like this, and I just keep going and going and going, because every time I swing a blow, I've still got that triangle that's holding me there. And you see a lot of people can do this one real fast, but they're leaning backwards, and they fall out of range. And of course, a 3-blow combination is a lot of times more useful than a 2-blow. And what I use is what I call infinite combinations. I can throw as many blows as I want to.
So 2 questions for you, Paul. This whole idea of getting my opponent to do what I want, that's kind of stood, that phrasing and the way that framing has stood in my mind. I would love to hear more about your thoughts on that, number 1. And number 2, how do you train for both moving and doing these infinite combinations with power?
Well, let me go to the second one first.
Okay.
Okay, what was the first one exactly again? The second one is, how do you train for it? I train the techniques. You have to learn the technique essentially perfectly. And this means you've got to train slowly to develop the technique and slowly make it faster, because you can't learn fast. It has to pass through your conscious mind, but if your conscious mind thinks about it, you can't go fast. It's too slow. You have to train the subconscious. This is sort of the no mind state, where the conscious mind is observing everything, not doing anything, and the subconscious gets that observation and then does something about it. And the subconscious is a whole lot faster than the conscious mind. You've heard maybe in something you got in somebody's head, you made them think during a basketball game or whatever. That's exactly what the opponents do. They try to kick you out of that no mind state. So the conscious mind is running the fight, and or whatever, and it's too slow. And so it's what I do is, after you learn the techniques, then I do something called slow work. And it's a very rigid, slow fighting. One, it has to be rhythmic. So your blows have to be 1, 2, 3, 4. If you got a shield, it's 1, 2, 3, and so on like this. You can't go here and then go like that. you can't do anything that you couldn't do fast. So you can't come in like this slow and then hop your blade over the shield like that. And you can't speed up. So you're doing a nice little even like this, then this one speeds up. You have to keep the same same speed for everything. It's not just the hands, it's also the feet. I mean, I've seen people that are still learning slow work, and they'll swing the blow like this, and sort of going back is fine with feet, like that. You can't do that either. Everything has to be, all the speed has to be the same. You have to stay in rhythm. In both cases, if you don't do those things, like you get out of rhythm or you speed up too soon like this, you're kicking yourself out of no mind. Because you've scared the conscious mind. When the conscious mind is scared, it takes over. And so it has to be, you can expect the blows coming in, and that teaches you how to put your things together, your blows together, how you maintain your balance. And then the other way around, it teaches you how to read the fight. You get so you're actually following the fight, like watching a movie that's happening in front of you. And you can anticipate things. You're not even thinking about it. Your subconscious does that. But it's a real thing. And then you speed up, and then I want to get up a little faster. You can go faster and faster and faster, and then at some point you got to put on armor because you're going too fast to be safe. And then what I do, one of the other things, you're trying to build up the person once they're learning the things I want them to learn, and they're about ready to really get into the fights. I want to make that transition as easy as possible. And so I'll set up choreographed training. I'll have two people. I tell them where they start. I tell them who swings first, where the blow is going to go. I tell the other one how they're going to respond and back. It's only usually 2 or 3 blows or 4 or 5 blows. And it's amazingly effective. Just really amazingly effective. Quite a while ago, I was teaching a seminar, and there was this one fellow who basically was fighting like this. He was hunched over, and you can't fight that way. And in the space of a couple hours, not spending full time with him, I got him so he was standing like I wanted him to, and swinging real blows.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful.
And you can really develop this perception thing a lot. And I have some exercises for that too.
Love to hear about your views on the perception, because I think that's the crux of it, right? Especially when you're wearing the armor, it's going to negate a little bit of your vision. So when your vision is cut, the perception and your proximity sense have to really kick in.
Yeah, like here's an example. This was one of my students, and he's an accomplished fighter. He's a knight. He's actually a count. So he's won the crown tournament once. Good fighter. But we fought a lot, and I could read him like a book. And there are certain times where a pause occurs in the fight, just organically.
Right.
And once I noticed this, I would start, when those things happen, those pauses happen, I would be in range on guard. And so was he. So he's where I can just swing and reach him, and I'm where he is. And I can feel him. I can feel him going, okay, I'm going to block anything. I'm going to block anything. I'm going to block anything. It's just, then he goes, I can't wait any longer. I'm going to hit him. And I hit him right there. Right when he changes his mind between defense and offense. And I can't point out anything I saw or anything. You can't see their face really. You can't really tell from the breathing because you stopped. And as far as I know, there was no movement there. There was just a change in intent, and I could pick it up.
I'd love to dig into this a little more, Paul, if it's okay with you. how do you read intent, and how do you perceive it so that you can be ready to respond? Because I think that's the difference that will make a huge difference.
Yeah, it is. Well, I call that process chi, and I can't define chi for you. So it's just something I picked up from my early days in the Asian arts. But I can do it, and I can demonstrate that I can do it. So something's there, and I can pick it up. And I've thought about that a lot. And what the best thing I've came up with is pattern recognition. And it's not, if he does this, then that's going to happen. It's everything I'm seeing and feeling and hearing and whatever is a pattern. And once I've got that pattern, like I'm sitting here really, by moving around like this, and then I raise my hand up, and you're supposed to react to me raising your hand up. That's not quite as easy as if I was dead still and then I started to move. As soon as I start to move anything, you'll notice if you're trained to do that. And that's what this does. I mean, everything, the whole thing, the pattern, the fight is a moving pattern that goes forward. And when I see something, I apprehend something happening, I can tell. So this is going to happen because the whole fight leads to this point.
So how do you develop this perception? You talked about having exercises for this perception and developing it. So what has worked for you?
Well, the slow work is the big thing. And there are all sorts of different ways you can run slower. We even do one blindfolded. You only blindfold one person. The other person just swings and blocks to make sure it continues. But mainly just the slow work itself. And then I've got a couple exercises where, so I'm teaching somebody, and they're standing in front of me, where if I swung down like this, I would hit them. And they're standing there and they're just trying to apprehend what I'm doing. I make them, I've got my sword here like this, and they're in their stance, basically just a regular relaxed stance. And I have them like imagine there are spider webs coming out of their fingertips, and they wrap the spider webs around my sword, and I can jiggle my sword a bit and they can feel it. It's sort of a fake it till you make it game. And then once they can feel my blade, then I'll take a half step back like this, and they'll feel the blade going back. And then when it starts going forward, there's that release of the pattern right there, and they can really follow it. And as it comes in, it feels like somebody's pushing. And what they have to do is when the blade comes in, they have to step to the side so the blade passes right next. And they can't really get out of range. They have to stay in range. So they have to use this dodging thing. And then I'll be able to do a big wind up because I want them to see what I'm doing. That's how you learn it. And then I'll take a step in, and then I'll try to cut. Basically, I'm trying to cut through the breastbone from various angles. So that's a big one too. That really helps. Once you get accomplished in the slower, then I start teaching this. And then I got one that I can't really demonstrate because it requires a partner. So I've got my partner over here, and we start like this. And one person starts a swing. You can't block. You have to dodge. And then you can't stop before you go to your next technique. So I'm going to swing like this, and you step in and swing. And as my sword comes back, I'm going to dodge the blow coming in and coming to my next. And we both doing this. It's just absolutely beautiful. You get two people who can really do it. Ain't easy.
Yeah, this is higher level stuff. This is not for your day one. Yeah. One other question along this: how do you maintain control of your breathing? And because especially when we start fighting full contact. It's very easy to get adrenalized and, get the tunnel vision and the breathing goes wacky, right? And the moment the breathing goes wacky, it's over. So what have you noticed?
Um, I guess I learned this so early in my game and my career that I don't really pay much attention to it. If people have problems with it, then we'll work on, you can hum, you can chew gum, you can count. You have to do all this in slow work, and it gets you so you can do it in the real fight. And then I set up like a physical mantra that the fighters can use before when they start fighting. And every time if this happens, they can back off and sort of go think their way through the mantra. If it's in the middle of a fight, you just can't do that very often. But when I come in, we're very formal in fighting in the SCA. So you come in and you salute various people. And the last one, you salute your opponent. Okay, so I salute my opponent, and then as I come down with the salutes, I'll salute down. When I come down like that, I center myself, and then I reach my shield out, bringing my sword and shield into position. And I grab my opponent with the shield, and I grab me with my sword. And right here, I come up on the balls of my feet. And now I'm balanced. I'm into no mind. I'm apprehending my opponent the way I want to apprehend him or her. And that really works very well.
Now to my favorite question, this whole area that you've been developing on how to get my opponent to do what I want.
Okay, so I don't want to be in range while I'm preparing to attack, because that gives my opponent too much of a chance, basically, who's quickest. I mean, my perception of things can help, but there are some guys who are like twice as fast physically as I am, including my older son. And so I'm not going to move into range and then start fighting. So they needed that slide step to come in, so they don't think I'm in range. This is part of the game, part of the way of tricking them to do what I want. I start from out of range, and so they're sort of relaxed because I'm out of range. And then things start moving, and the first thing you see moving is my sword. So you can't tell I'm stepping in or anything like that, because once the sword moves, all the attention goes to the sword. Because when you're lining up for a fight, there's only one thing that's a threat, and that's the sword, or whatever you're using. So I start from out of range, and the slide step allows me to slide in with power and speed. And so that creates a surprise. I'm lined up here, I'm out of range, and my opponent, I start to swing, and the thought sequence, I think, goes through, it's out of range. Oh, maybe he's not. Oh, shit. And then something hits. And it might be just hitting the shield or whatever. One of the popular styles that I really don't like is they fight with their shield here and their sword here, which means you don't have any offense until you pull your sword back and swing at it. And I'll actually skip my first blow off their sword.
So it drops the sword and they can't recoil.
Well, it's even worse than that. So they're like this, and my blows are coming in from this side because I'm swinging right-handed. So it skips off the thing and it drives the sword down, and their first reaction is to come up like this.
Yeah.
And if I'm throwing the Molinet that I showed you before,
They're open.
yeah, so it hits the sword, goes up, and it comes right back in where they had the sword before.
Yeah. I
so
can see that.
It's that kind of thing. It's really some interesting little things. Like one observation I make is if somebody's charging you and you do not real fast, but not like that, a swing right above their knees. They go like this. And that slows them down and they even stop because they can't walk and move forward like that.
Yeah.
And then I'll pile the things on. I'll do the slide step in. Okay, and I'll I'll miss. I'll go around like that. Then I'll come back. You know, this is getting ridiculous because I'm going to go too many steps. Okay, I tricked them into going like this. Here comes the moment they come in, and they're behind. You know, they're not in rhythm anymore, so they're behind, and they really try to move up there. And that Molinet maybe that, or maybe this, or a number of things. So I tricked them once, tricked them twice, and hit them. And every time I trick them, it adds on, makes it worse and worse and worse.
Right.
And then the other side of the game is I want to make them tell me what they're doing.
How do you do that?
You know what when I refer to a tell, which what I'm talking about. Okay, I want to make them give me a tell before they attack. So I purposely don't stop in range. So I'm just out of range, and as you get better and better, you can gauge range a lot better. So basically, I'm playing about 3 inches out of range. So if they lean forward, they can get me. But if they lean forward, their body has to show me that first. You just can't lean forward. You have to make your balance has to adjust. So if they're fighting like this, they want to lean forward. They gotta make your hips work, and I can catch them. So I'm a little ahead of the thing because I watch for tells, and I make them do tells. And of course, you don't have to make them to do tells too much because, at least in the SCA, there's so few people that really believe. I have a joke that in the area where I'm in, that they made an agreement between all of them that they won't look at tells because everybody does just gross tells. And so then when adding, I want to make them do a tell. I'll step into range. You know, I'll do my slide step in. I won't be in range, and I'll swing. But I won't even try to do anything, and they'll react, or they'll go like this. Or I could be even nastier. One of the things I do is I fight two swords like this, and the word gets around. Actually, don't attack Paul when he has two swords. Let him attack you. So my opponent's fighting sword or shield, and their sword's going to come in on this side. So I raise my hand up. Come on, here you go, here you go, here you go. And eventually they do it, and you can see them going, you know, they're behind the shields, and then they swing. So I've got miles of warning there, and they think I'm going to come down a block of this sword next. I come down a block of this sword, and then I do that, and those two blows hit like that.
It's fascinating. You know, one thing I want to ask you from these, as you're reading tales, have you noticed any tells when fear kicks in? What are some common tells that you've noticed when fear kicks in?
Well, especially if they're in our game where they're here like this, they go like that. Everything tight. The shoulders hunch. That's a big one. Probably. The other way is they'll go that way. They'll actually literally take a back posture, which you don't want to do in this game.
Yeah.
One of the other things, just mentioning it, one of the ways, back a while back, 20, 30 years ago, somebody came up with fighting with your sword foot forward. And so I'm initiating a fight with my sword foot back so I can get more power and ride it like that. If I want it the other way around, or I end up through a combination, bang, 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 I end up here, my hip is way back and my balance is still centered. They don't do that. they sit there and they'll lean. And they'll lean forward because what they're trying to do is they're trying to get in close enough without you noticing so they can hit you. And apparently it works for everybody except me. Because I can see them coming a mile away and nobody else seems to pay attention. So there's a funny little story about that. And I was watching a program that I just happened to stop on TV, and it's they're interviewing a zookeeper, and she's the elephant keeper. She's washing an elephant, and talking. And you can see behind her, there's an elephant really moving slowly, and it's creeping over to get the other hose to squirt her with. And she catches it out of the corner of her eye. She's, bad elephant, bad elephant. It goes away, It turns and says, they think if they move really slowly, you can't see them.
That's pretty funny. It's a great story.
And that happens right in that scene. They're sitting there.
Well, in some ways, when we get down fighting, we haven't really evolved that much from our ancestors,
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the other little interesting things about really messing with people is when I fight with the long weapons. Let me pick one up for a second. This is sort of a weird blade. The blade wouldn't have that much blade usually on, more like a naginata, but this is like 7.5 feet long. And when I'm playing with people, when I'm playing with this against a sword and shield guy, I usually put the backhand on the side of their sword and swing from, because then I can block the legs. I'll come in and I'll use a punch to the edge of their shield, drive the shield back in the face, and then I'll just sit there, and then they'll try to swing, and I'll block it really fast and come back in with the back edge. And a lot of times that doesn't succeed because there are too many things hanging around it. But now they know I'm after the blade. So they'll have the shield in front of them like where this thing is, but they'll hold the blade back a little further like that. And I will position myself so my blade's right through their head and that thing, their sword. And I'll just pop. And it's just to annoy them. And then eventually, if they don't make some really, really bad move to get out of that situation. You notice on the Inzor, this is one of our basket hilts. We use a lot of these, but there's a little protrusion on this end where the clamp that holds the sword in there like that. And I'll take the end of my sword, or my blade or great sword, and grab it right under there, and literally turn them around, and then hit them. This is just a demonstration stick. These are what I teach with, because I've got carpal tunnel. Most of us do at my age, and you can see it's not quite as butch as the other sword. And this was longer. Well, not anymore. I used to fight with 40-inch swords, and when I started really just teaching all the time, I cut them down to 30 because these things come in 9-foot lengths, 9'4", 9'6", all like this, and you can get 3 36-inch swords out of it. Wow. But this one weighs probably 1.25 pounds or something like this. This one weighs 3 pounds. Oh, did you want me to demonstrate how fast this one moves with those techniques? Can't hear you. So it moves around pretty quick.
Yeah.
Of course, with these, the little thin ones, I can sort of do magic.
Right. Right. No, I think this was great, Paul. So I think this gives us a good overview and a perspective on the system. So I think it has enough in this particular podcast. So perhaps in our next recording, what we can do is get into each class of your techniques and then continue the free flow of some variations and your perspectives on things that you've picked up and what has worked, where it has worked, why it has worked, and henceforth.
Yeah, I'll have to make a list of my variations because there's so many of them I forget.
Yeah, I mean, whatever comes to your mind, right? So I think if we, what I would suggest is maybe 45 minutes or so with each of the major class of techniques and just a conversation like this. And I think it'll give all our listeners a good perspective on it and also an idea of what you're talking about. And so really appreciate you actually demonstrating all of this, Paul.
Oh, I enjoy it. We won't need 45 minutes per technique because they're so similar that you're only talking about the last little part of it when the variations happen. That's another. That's another thing. You get them so that they're really afraid of that thing that's sitting right in front of their face, and they'll react to anything you do to them. So I see you're getting busy. So.
No, she's just come back. So I think Papa, I'll be there. So Paul, I will beg off now. I think this makes it wraps it up well for this particular episode, and then I'll follow up shortly with how to set up the following conversation.
Okay, you have a good weekend then.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, Paul, and thank you so much.
For some, it's the quest of an empire. For some, it's been the quest of power and riches. For some, the quest for honor. And yet for others, the quest for freedom. Blades and bladecraft have done just that. So Richard Burton has said, the history of the sword is the history of mankind. And that's the journey we are on. No blade culture has defined the world as much as the Spanish bladecraft. And yet, no art develops in a vacuum. It is shaped by those that it interacts and fights with, and also shapes the cultures whether they are conquered or manage to maintain their freedom. In this particular lab, we're going to look at how Spanish bladecraft influenced arts across the 5 continents. We've traversed 20,000 plus miles, brought in teachers with over 700 years of combined bladecraft experience, together in one place at one time, where over 3 days and 40 hours of non-stop training, you will be able to see and experience firsthand how it shaped Europe, how it shaped the bladecraft of Northern Africa, how it developed the arts, both indigenous and otherwise, in Philippines. Moving over to Latin America, from the jungles of Colombia and Panama, how the arts of machete developed. Coming further up north, looking at the arts of the southwest Mexicali region, where the long bulwark was developed. Or looking at the development of a very American form of fighting, the Bowie bladecraft. The impact on the Asian martial arts itself, with the Chinese art being completely transformed by fencing and fencing footwork. Lastly but not the least, is looking at the biomechanics of what full contact bladecraft does, how it shapes your movement and what works and what doesn't work. This is the experiment we are embarking on. The lucky few who come here will get a view of 500 years of bladecraft that developed across 5 continents, and the relationship between the conquerors and the conquered, between the wannabe conquerors and the freedom fighters, between those who fought as pirates and those who fought to maintain their honor. This is that experiment. This is holy blood, holy blade. For more information,